When it comes to colouring, there are two types of markers that seem to be extremely popular: alcohol and acrylic. But which are best? Let's take a deep dive and find out. So I felt the best way of discussing the differences was to actually do a side-by-side comparison. So I've taken one of my images, this is the gorgeous Celine, and I've just divided her in half, and I'm going to paint half with the acrylic markers and half with the alcohol markers. So I'm choosing my acrylic markers first because I have more alcohol markers than I do acrylic, so I thought it'd be easier to match it that way round. Now, acrylic markers are opaque, whereas your alcohol markers are semi-transparent. I do find acrylic markers slightly more difficult to blend, but I think you have to kind of lean into the look that they give. Now, I wanted a soft blended look on the face, so I did come in with a paintbrush just to try and soften that blend. But if you want to sort of lean into the strengths of an acrylic marker, it is good to kind of take it down that sort of very painterly route, which we're going to do a little bit more when it comes to doing her hair. It was really easy to sort of build up the different layers of colours. So I'm kind of going to block this in, and then for this stage we definitely have a much more painterly look when it comes to her hair. So we're able to do that sort of flicking motion, and then I come in with other colours and go over it. Now, sometimes the disadvantage is it kind of maybe took me a little bit longer because I was kind of going over what was the darker bits. So it took me a while to get that balance for it to look right. Also, I find this bit incredibly difficult because I was trying to preserve the line work because I was wanting both sides to match. And so obviously because they're opaque, if you go over the line work, you've lost the lines. That can be an advantage depending on the style of colouring that you are doing, or it can be a disadvantage if you're wanting to kind of keep those lines. Here, when it comes to the glasses and the eyes, it's definitely very much an advantage the fact that they are so opaque, because I want the glasses to be on top of everything. I want it to kind of cover any sort of extra lines that there was, and then just being able to do those white juicy highlights, it is so easy just to be able to do that. I like working dark to light, so the fact that I can come in and add those light highlights at the end is absolutely perfect for me. So now we move on to the alcohol markers, and as we've said, these are sort of semi-translucent, so you have to build layers to get your blending to look really good. But I like the unusual colours and the depth of colour that you can create by being able to kind of layer up the different colours and blend. You can get some really interesting colour combos and interesting effects to be able to do that. Now, when doing things like the hair, it can tend to desaturate, so I tend to work dark to light, but then I kind of go back in and flick the dark colour in at the end. Now this, I had no bother doing the top half of the bun because I didn't have to worry. My alcohol markers were not going to obliterate the lines, but I did find it more difficult when it came to the glasses. You can see there's just a little bit of the glasses there that's purple and it should be blue. So in that case, I would have preferred my acrylic marker. Also now I'm trying to do the eye shinies and the details without using an acrylic marker. So what I am doing is I am lifting the alcohol up. Now you can create some really fun techniques with that particular technique using isopropyl or a blender pen. You don't have that option when it comes to acrylic markers. Now I am trying to bring back the line work that I lost on the acrylic marker side with a small acrylic marker pen, and that is the side by side comparison. Also with your alcohol markers, they do bleed through, so if you're working in a colouring book, that would be a negative. Now, one of the things I absolutely love doing is to combine both alcohol and acrylic, and that's what I did in one of my favourite pieces of art that I have created this year, and that's this Tinkerbell page. So I really played with the fact that the alcohol marker is semi-translucent. We were able to kind of lift some of that colour to create a really exciting background, but we were also able to kind of make the wings seem transparent so you could see her body through the wings, and that really just elevated the piece. But then we had the opacity of the acrylic markers to create that big swirl that comes around her, and also the gold on her wings, and I think combining the two together is just chef's kiss. Mwah! It's perfect. So for this next section, I am going to colour on a black piece of card because, as I said, we're looking into the pros and cons of each. So as you can see, alcohol markers do absolutely nothing on black card, but this is definitely where your acrylic markers will shine. Because of that opacity, you can colour on literally any colour and you are going to be able to get it to work. So in this particular painting, I'm definitely leaning into the strength of the acrylic markers, and rather trying to get a perfect blend, I am going for a much more loose, painterly sort of style. And I think that's really what we need to think of, because the pros and cons of each could literally be a pro or a con depending on what you enjoy when you're colouring. Do you enjoy the pages to feel neat? Do you enjoy not having bleed through? Well, in that case, you would go for an acrylic marker. Do you prefer the painterly look over an airbrushed look? Again, in that case, you would go for the acrylic marker. But if you love the airbrushed look and you love the fact that you can create interesting effects using things like isopropyl and layering different colours on top of each other, then the alcohol markers might be for you. So it is really about thinking, what do I want from my colouring? What style do I like? And starting from there. And as I said, for me, I genuinely love both. And what I do love a lot is mixing the two together. That way you can lean into the strengths of both and get the advantages from both to create your finished piece. So it's difficult to kind of call out a winner. I think for me, if I was told that I had to choose one, I would probably go for the alcohol markers, because for me personally, I prefer that blended look. And I like being able to create special effects in the background, but I would be begging that I could still keep at least a white gel pen, if not a whole set of acrylic markers, because just being able to add that sort of pop at the end really makes a difference. So what about yourself? What sort of colouring style do you like? What are your favourites and why? So at the end of this piece, I am creating these gorgeous sort of firefly effects. I do love doing that, and especially you can smudge things with your finger just to kind of mute it down a little bit, and then just pop a little bit of bright white right into the center. And I think this is absolutely gorgeous, and this is a look that you would never ever be able to achieve with your alcohol markers on black card, because it just wouldn't happen. You can get nice toned effects using your alcohol markers on things like craft or a grey card, but definitely not with black. But there's lots of experimentation and fun to be had with both of these types of markers. Just as a little sort of PS to this video, I know that it'll be said about acrylic markers that they can go on anything, and they really can, but actually your alcohol markers are permanent markers too. So you can actually go over things like wood. You do get a little bit of a bleed, which I'm showing you there. You don't get that bleed with your acrylic markers. Although I wouldn't recommend using your alcohol markers on a stone. I reckon that it would work, but it would probably damage the nib. And again, on things like plastic and acetate, you can get both to work. It maybe needs just a little bit more drying time than normal, but you can create some really cool stained glass effects. Now I'm just showing you this because when I was in my card making era, I did this a lot. I would kind of colour it in, and look at your alcohol markers, it's kept it sparkly, and that was gorgeous because you could match it to your project, and you get a nice opaque look if you use an acrylic marker. Thank you so much for watching. I do hope that you find this brief overview useful. I would love to know what you think. What do you feel that are the pros and cons on both? What are your favourite? There is just one other thing I have to mention, because I completely forgot when it came to a voiceover. You can tell it's not AI. I actually come up with a script myself, hence I forget things. But one of the main things that you do need to maybe take into consideration when it comes to your alcohol markers is not just the bleed through, but the fact that they are absolutely notorious for fading. So if you create a piece of artwork like I have of this, and that you absolutely love, it is well worth sort of scanning and keeping and preserving. I tend to keep this stored inside this book here just to kind of keep it away from light, but even that won't 100% protect it. So again, what are you going to be doing with your artworks? If it's something that you're wanting to go on and sell, then alcohol markers might not be the best unless you're willing to do prints. So that's just a quick PS. If you would like to know more about both types of markers, you might enjoy these videos coming up, and I will see you guys next week. Bye.